Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1987 romantic comedy Mannequin. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I'm going to give a special shout out to Brian for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. Link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Mannequin is one of those films that when it came out, it was massacred by critics, but it was a surprise hit. It actually did pretty well in the box office, and it garnered a pretty decent reputation, at least at the time, from audiences. It even got a sequel. And it's a film that I was familiar with. I definitely was aware of its existence. I remember seeing maybe some clips now and then on TV, but I never really got around to watching the entire thing. Honestly, I probably listened to the song from the soundtrack, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, more than I actually watched the film in its entirety. And I still really like that song. And if I were to be honest, I'd probably say I like that song more than I do this movie, but I still had fun with this film. I don't think it's a 80s classic. It's not one of my personal favorites, but it was endearing and entertaining enough. I would say it's pretty firmly above average, and in large part due to the heavy lifting by the film's two leads, Kim Cattrall and Andrew McCarthy. The two of them are terrific. They're a tremendous pair in this movie, and I think they're honestly the biggest reason why this film was such a big hit because they're just so good together. Their chemistry is great, and they're a pair that you just legitimately enjoy watching. And that really helps a film that, when you really think about it, is pretty daft. The plot is about a department store worker who falls in love with a mannequin who comes to life. Like that is a pretty silly concept, and it still somehow works because of the strength of these two leads. The direction is by Michael Gottlieb, who also co-wrote the film along with Edward Rugoff, and the direction is a bit stiff. I would say at times it's every bit as rigid as the mannequins that you would see in the department store window. Like there are times where it's just very just stock standard, been there, done that, nothing really that unique visually. Shots that just are pretty stagnant, just kind of stay there, and not really a lot of variety when it comes to camera angles or movement. And in large part, I think that's because this was his first film. Prior to this, I think he only did some commercials. If it wasn't his first film, it's definitely one of his first films, and it really does show. The inexperience definitely does show on the screen. The film is at its best when it comes to the direction, when it comes to the various different montages or various different sequences involving Kim Cattrall and Andrew McCarthy just having fun in the department store at night, playing dress up, acting like they're extras in a music video, that kind of stuff. Like that's where the film is at its best, directing wise, and that makes sense because that's a lot of stuff that you would see in a music video or a commercial. Those are just visual eye candy moments, like moments where the director, all he has to do is just kind of be there with the camera and just let the actors do most of the work. When it comes to anything else, it needs to have like emotion or needs to showcase any other element of directing. This film is definitely lacking in that department. But I will say this: it's not a film that I would say is considerably badly or poorly directed. It's just a movie that, at best, is just average in the directing department. And then you have the film's screenplay, which I wouldn't say it's as stiff as the direction in the film. I will say that it's a little bit better overall, but it's still inconsistent. It's still hit and miss. And the reason for that is that this is a concept and an idea that's not only silly and pretty absurd, but it's bare bones. It's an idea that can only go so far. And I honestly don't think even the best writers at the time could really squeeze more out of this limited concept. And the concept is that you have this guy, Jonathan, who works at a department store. And prior to him getting the job at this department store, he was down on his luck. He had gone through job after job because he's a dreamer. He's a guy who wants to spend more time creating his art than just going through your average day-to-day job and stuff like that. Like, this is a guy who he's taken his time to create the best looking pizza with the right combination of toppings, even to the point where he's not getting it into the oven on time and it's not going to the customer when it should, and he gets fired. He's messing around with the hedges when he's working as a hedge trimmer, that kind of stuff. And he is just in a bad spot. He keeps losing job after job after he lost his dream job, which is working as a guy who builds mannequins. And he's desperate. His girlfriend breaks up with him. He's getting rained on. His motorcycle won't even start. And then he sees in the window this mannequin. And it's the same mannequin that he worked on before he was ultimately fired from his first job that caused this downward spiral. And that's a moment of inspiration for him. And he then decides to hang around the shop and winds up getting a job working there as a department store clerk. As a guy who works at the department store. And it's a department store that's struggling and hasn't had good business and so on. And there's a takeover that's going on with his rival department store called Illustra, who is also employing Jonathan's ex-girlfriend. And eventually he realizes one night that the mannequin is alive. And he gets to know the mannequin, gets to know the girl. Her name is Emmy. He falls for her, and you have the whole awkward stuff involving this guy who's in love with a mannequin, and the mannequin only comes to life when he's there and when he sees it. Otherwise, everyone just sees a regular mannequin, so he looks like he's just a crazy person. And there's some stuff involving Illustra and how they want to blackmail Jonathan because the mannequin, Emmy, is so good at creating these window displays that the store starts getting more business and gets a lot of buzz, and it's taking away business from Illustra. And so they want to steal Jonathan away and this mysterious girl. They find out that it's a mannequin, and they want to blackmail him and ridicule him for being romantically involved with a mannequin and basically being some kind of freak. And that doesn't work. So then they decide to take extreme measures. And because of the fact that their takeover also didn't work, because that fell through, because there was this guy who was working for the department store, Mr. Richards, who was trying to sell the department store that was owned by Miss Timken, trying to sell it and basically give it to Illustra, and then he would work for Illustra. He gets fired along with this security guard named Felix, who's a bumbling, incompetent fool. They then decide, with the help of the guy who runs Illustra, I'm trying to look up, BJ Wirt. Of course, his name is BJ, so of course he's a dick. He then comes up with this plan to have those two involved, and they're gonna steal the mannequin and hold it hostage, essentially. And that's how they're gonna get Jonathan to join their team, and so on. But of course, that also blows up spectacularly in their face. And there's a climax that involves a fire hose and all other types of shenanigans. The mannequin almost gets destroyed by Jonathan's ex, but Jonathan saves her in time before she gets chopped up. And because of that, for some reason, the mannequin is now human, and now everybody can see the mannequin. And Jonathan and the mannequin live happily ever after, or Emmy, because she has a name. And yeah, it's one of those things you're like, okay, this is pretty predictable. This is pretty cliched, even for rom-com standards. There's a lot of padding when it comes to this movie, when it comes to the story, the script. So many scenes that just involve Emmy and Jonathan just doing stuff randomly in the department store at night, playing dress up, acting like they're in a music video. There's a scene where Emmy flies around in a I forgot exactly what the name of it is, a hang glider. She's flying around in a hang glider because she wants to experience what it's like to fly and stuff like that. Goofy stuff involving the security guard and his dog, which at one point was called Rambo, but it doesn't act anything like Rambo because it's a total weakling. And then he gets another dog that's called Terminator, and the same thing happens. James Spader plays this sniveling guy who works for the company called Mr. Richards, who's a turncoat and is also incompetent in his own way. Even the guy who runs Illustra is also incompetent. That's a problem I did have with the script. None of the villains really feel like there's any sense of competency to them, and I get it. That happens a lot in comedies, but I think that's a problem because even in a comedy, you need to have some balance. You need to have a villain that actually it seems like they could potentially pose a threat or provide some sort of problem to your leads, and that never really happens here because I never bought for 1 second that BJ and his crew would ever pull off any of their schemes. So that doesn't help the movie when it comes to its pacing, let alone the effectiveness of the story. But the biggest selling point of this film is just the scenes with Jonathan and Emmy. It's simple, scenes with them just hanging out and just having fun in the department store, but it's effective because the strength of the film is in this concept and in Jonathan as a character, because it does a good job making you feel for him and making you root for the guy, and it does a good job establishing the relationship between Jonathan and this mannequin, Emmy. So that's really where it works. When it comes to the stuff with Jonathan and his ex, not so much. When it comes to this battle between this department store and Illustra, the competing department store, and I know I just keep saying department store, but it's because it's just a generic name, because Prince and Company, that's what it's called. So Prince and Company and Illustra, that really doesn't really go that far because, like I said, Illustra never really seems like a legitimate threat, despite the fact that they were a more popular, successful company uh, for many years up until this point. And honestly, the only other bits of enjoyment I get are honestly from the actors, not necessarily from the script. Well, I mean, there are some moments like scenes with Meshach Taylor's character Hollywood Montrose, where he's got the fire hose at the end and he's spraying it on the security guards and GW Bailey and company, and saying lines like "Mine's bigger than yours," like that. That's cheeky and clever and pretty funny. But even that character there are some issues with how that character is written, because they clearly wrote this character in a way where he's flamboyant and gay, and in a way that's meant to be funny. Like they're using his homosexuality and turning it into a punchline at times, and that's honestly kind of rough to watch when it comes to some points in this movie. But Meshach Taylor makes up for it because he just sells that character and he owns it. And despite some of the controversial aspects of the writing of this character still works because of Meshach Taylor. And that's what I'm saying. A lot of this stuff works. And I would still say the film is relatively above average, despite all of these things going against it, because of what the cast brings to the film. Uh, they just make it work. Kim Cattrall, Andrew McCarthy, G.W. Bailey, James Spader, uh, um, Meshach Taylor, even Steve Vinovich, who plays BJ. Like, they still make this all work. Estelle Getty, who was in Stop or My Mama Shoot and the Golden Girls. And yeah, it's a concept and a script that at times is not very well written. I mean, from the beginning, it's got this weird opening with Emmy in a sarcophagus, dressed like a mummy, and there's this whole thing where she's gonna be betrothed to some guy she doesn't want to marry. But I'm like, why is she dressed like a mummy? Like, is she gonna die? Is she gonna be mummified? Is that why this is happening? They don't really explain it, and then she just asks the gods for assistance, and they grant her a wish, and she gets out of it, but with a catch. And you find out that she's been around for centuries, but it's not really explained that thoroughly as to why she's a mannequin. So maybe I might have missed something, but I don't really think I did. I just think it's not a very concise script when it comes to that. And there's just other things that you're just kind of, well, wait a minute. Like, huh? Like the ending of the movie where the curse is just lifted because she's in peril and she's saved by Jonathan. And I'm like, wasn't she in peril before in other scenes in the movie? Like the motorcycle sequence and stuff like that. Why is it this moment where she's about to be grinded and she's saved is the only moment where she has the curse lifted? I don't get that. I don't understand why they ended the film the way that they did with this maintenance guy who forcibly pushes himself sexually on Jonathan's ex because he thinks that she's a mannequin. And then later on, he's digging through the trash to find a magic mannequin of his own, like an incel before incels were a thing. Like, I don't understand that ending. I think it's supposed to be funny, but I just think the tone is just off. It doesn't really fit the rest of the movie. Speaking of something that doesn't fit, like the opening credits of this weird animation, like, okay, it's kind of fun, but at the same time, there's nothing like that in the movie. Like the tone of the film is not that silly. It's silly at times, but not that level of silliness. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those movies where, yeah, it does the best that it can with such a limited concept, and the cast does the heavy lifting. That's really the case here. Kim Cattrall is gorgeous. She's just a beautiful woman anyway, and she's just really talented. And honestly, I think this is one of her best performances because she made a character that is a mannequin work and made it glamorous and made it a character that had a personality and charm and a certain sensibility to it. And Andrew McCarthy was a great as Jonathan. He does a great job playing an everyman. He really does. Plays those roles so well. Like a guy who you can relate to because he doesn't seem like he's that distant. He doesn't seem like he's that far off from your average guy, but he's got enough personality and charisma and charm to really engage the audience and be a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, like I said, the rest of the cast is also great. G.W. Bailey, he's always a lot of fun when he's playing these bumbling villain characters because he just brings so much to them. James Spader, like you hate this guy. He's this sniveling worm, and Spader just plays those roles so well, in just such believable fashion, like to the point where you want to jump into the movie and just wring his little neck because he's just so unlikable, but in a good way, in a way that is entertaining. Stevanovich, less so, but still effective enough. As BJ, the head of Illustra, you definitely want to see him get his comeuppance too. Carol Davis, though, is Roxy. Jonathan's ex, and Christopher Maher is Armand, this guy who works for her that eventually becomes an item, or not really an item, that's not the right word. He becomes her boyfriend. Didn't really care for those two. I don't think their performance is really that great. Either they were a little too over the top, like Armand, or just too underplayed. Because I believe the actress is just not really that great in terms of her range, and I think that's what happened with Carol Davis as Roxy. Um, Estelle Getty was fine as Timken, but pretty restrained. I don't think they gave her enough quips, which is what she's the best at, really. James Spader, like I said, I already talked about him, but might as well mention him again because he's just so good at playing these type of roles. Meshach Taylor, I thought was marvelous as Hollywood Montrose, despite the way that that character is written. He just does such a great job with that role. He's just so much fun to watch. His line delivery is so energetic, and you could tell that he's having a blast playing this character. And it's not really that extensive or that important of a character when you really think about it when it comes to the plot. Like he's there at the end with the fire hose and everything and so on, but it's not like he has a very key crucial part of the narrative. And it's not even that big of a role, but he just does such a good job playing this character and just being flamboyant in a way that is just a lot of fun to watch and doesn't make you fully cringe like some other performances by some other actors who have tried to play that role. That honestly, I do. I think it goes down as one of the better performances of a gay character in a movie because he gets it. It's not like he is a punchline at times, but he gets a moment at the end with the fire hose. So it's not like he's a complete and total joke. So that's honestly a step up from a lot of films from that time. Now, when it comes to anything else, like the cinematography by Tim Scherstedt, it's it's so. It's there. It's at its best when it's trying to just emphasize the size and of the mall or the department store and just showcase just the various different crazy scenarios that Emmy and Jonathan get into at night, and all the different displays and the different variety of window displays and stuff like that. I'll say it's at its best when it comes to showcasing the the look of those scenes, but anything other than that, it's just not really that great of a film when it comes to the way that it looks. The editing by Richard Halsey, Frank Jimenez, it's also there. There are some times where the editing is a bit, it looks like it's a bit rushed. Like there was maybe some competing ideas in the editing room from the director or other people, so it kind of clashes at times. And it's at yet again, it's at its best when it comes to scenes with a lot of movement. The score by Sylvester Levay, it's there. Not one of my favorites of his, but it works fine for the film and for the overall vibe of the movie. Like it works for Mannequin. At times, it's a bit, I would say, kind of I wouldn't say sugary sweet. It's a bit schmaltzy. But I think that's definitely what they were trying to go for. The film is a lot better when it comes to the soundtrack, like the music that's used for the film. Nothing's gonna stop us now, as well as some other songs. Although nothing's gonna stop us now, I was surprised it wasn't used more in the movie. Like it was used mostly like at the end and then the end credits, but it wasn't used in like a sequence involving uh, any of the stuff happening in the mall or anything like that. Um, Goes by at a pretty breezy pace. It's only 90 minutes, and that's with the end credits. So you take out the end credits, and then it's only like an hour and 20 something minutes. So it's not like it's a film that overstays its welcome or is just dragging its feet too much and is just boring. I wouldn't call this a boring film, despite how you know how it lacks depth when it comes to the characters, or the story, or the narrative. There's not really a lot of surprises, even though you have this tagline like when she comes to life, anything can happen. Like not really. But it's still a fun movie. It's a fun watch. And like I said, in large part because of McCarthy and Cattrall. Like they are so good together. And it's a film that I think in a lot of ways also captures the right vibe, the right feel. It's a feel good movie. It's the kind of film you pop on and turn your brain off and enjoy the camp, but at the same time, have fun with the 80s charm, which is the signature of the decade, and just kick back and just let the vibes wash over you. It's that kind of movie where you're like, yeah, it's predictable. Yeah, it's cliched. It's this and that. There's not a ton of surprises. But what it does right is it just creates a certain vibe and just makes you feel good. It's like the epitome of like a feel good movie. Like you put it on and so a lot of the stuff is just kind of hit and miss, but there's just something about it that just makes you feel good about yourself. You're like, okay, it perks you up. It's that kind of movie. Um, but anyway, that's my thoughts on Mannequin, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.